What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre. This is HoopIntellect, and welcome back to the channel. Now, last week, UConn, of course, won its second straight national title in dominant fashion. And with that college season being officially over with, that means we're getting closer and closer into draft season being fully underway. Now, there's still a lot going on in terms of the portal and testing the waters that'll shape how this board looks over the next month or so, but that's just kind of the nature of it. We'll talk about a few more players in addition to the usual top 60, but before that, we'll get into some of those right outside that group and a few of those draft decisions that have recently been made. Dink Pate's situation is probably most interesting to me. He's not draft eligible until next year given his age, but he signed a 2-year deal with the Ignite, and because they're disbanding it, he's looking to be eligible this year. He'd probably be a lottery lock for me if they do allow him to be in the 24 draft, so that'll be a major one to follow. Tyrese Proctor is returning for his junior season at Duke, so he'll look to put it together on a talented incoming squad. Colin Murray-Boyles last said that he plans on returning to South Carolina, but if he decides to change his mind, he'll likely be in the first round. Bronny James has declared while keeping all of his options still open. My feeling is that he ends up staying in the draft and the Lakers will take him with their second or give him a two-way, but for him personally, I do think he'd benefit from a fully healthy year where he can just kind of go get his rhythm and bearings back on the court again. But I remain confident he's a future NBA talent, so we'll see what happens there. Still the same thing on Terrence Shannon Jr. When things are settled in his situation, we'll go from there. And then after that, there's a big group of others in the mix, a lot of talent in different spots who we'll soon see at the NBA Combine, the G League Elite Camp, or the Portsmouth Invitational that starts this week. But moving on to this top 65. UConn's Cam Spencer is one of those guys you just want to have on your side. He felt like the biggest extension of Dan Hurley on the court this year for this team, and he played a massive role as a shooter and playmaker during this championship run. Now, he just turned 24 and is a bit of an undersized combo guard, but if there was a Gabe Vincent to come out of this class, he would probably be the guy. Arkansas's Trevor Brazile recently declared for the draft and is signing an agent. Now, the injuries and the lack of consistent production this year leave him a bit in limbo, especially for someone who had lottery buzz after Maui last year, but a stretch four who can sky above the rim and provide rim protection is at the least going to get late second round interest. Nikola Jurisic has been playing some of his best basketball as of late for Mega and might have finally put it together in adjusting to life without Nikola Topic this year. He struggled early and had been kind of a theoretical shooter for the last couple years, but he's been on fire lately while also showing real creation chops as a good-sized wing. Teams are already familiar with his game, and I think he could really stand out more in the process this year. Tristan Newton going from starting his career at East Carolina to being a 2-time champion and most outstanding player of the Final Four is something we're probably not seeing again even in the NIL and transfer era. Now, as a prospect, he may not have an elite skill, but he does a lot of things at a solid level and just finds a way to make things happen. Being the engine of an offense as complex as UConn's is probably way more valuable than we give it credit, and I think he's a lock to get a two-way, if not prove his way into higher parts of the draft here soon. Now, for my box plus minus fans, Janai Broome put up the 25th best season since 2008, and all but Gary Clark and Thomas Walker from that list were drafted, so that's pretty good company to be in. But beyond that, Broome's productivity, defensive feel, and improvement as a shooter should keep him on boards as a solid second-round big man. Juan Nunez is a big-time passing talent with great feel and poise in the pick and roll and a ton of pro experience. Now, my biggest drawback to his game is he's consistently struggled as a shooter and pull-up threat. He's not a great athlete and can underwhelm as a point of attack defender. Now, maybe you buy the playmaking talent enough to figure it out somewhere, especially given he's still super young, but I just want to see a little bit more from him, and that's why I've got him more in this range. Peyton Sandfort had a rough last game against Utah in the NIT, but I love the way that he played this year. And the game before, he absolutely lit up Kansas State. He's another prospect where you pretty much know what you're getting as a high-level shooter with solid size and decent feel as a passer. The defense is going to be a task for him, but if he can't prove that he can survive, he could find a spot somewhere as a floor spacer. Jalen Bridges' upside as a 3-and-D wing with good size will keep him well into draftable conversations. He had a sneaky good year for Baylor, and while you're not necessarily blown away by his game, I think he could definitely carve out a role in quite a few situations. It took Illinois' Coleman Hawkins a little while to put it all together, and he still left some to be desired at times, but a 6'10 forward with his skill set as a versatile defender, shooter, and passer has to get real looks, and I think he could end up being a better fit for the NBA game than he was in Big Ten basketball if the shot holds. San Francisco's Jonathan Mogbo is one of those players you only have to watch a couple times to see it. He's one of the most impressive athletes and versatile defenders in this class and a talented passer. And even though he's an undersized big who can't shoot yet, I just think he has too many pieces not to take a chance on. Now, he'll likely need a good situation to pop, but the talent is absolutely there. Mark Sears had a tremendous season, but he took it up another level in March, leading Alabama to the Final Four, and after that, I'd be shocked if he didn't get a two-way whether he's picked on draft night or not. The Jalen Brunson comparisons are probably unfair given he's a star, but the similarities in parts of their games is pretty interesting to watch, and with the Knicks guard currently playing at the level he is, I think it might give Sears an extra boost on top of just being a good basketball player. Jamal Shead had an amazing season this year, leading Houston to a 1 seed and winning countless awards along the way. Unfortunately, he had an ankle injury against Duke that pretty much ended the team's tourney chances the second that he went down, but he well established himself as a draftable guard. He's a big-time point of attack and team defender and a solid distributor who has a chance to play that energy guard role in the league if he can get his three-point shot together. Colorado State's Sneak Clifford of course had a great showing in his first tournament game against Virginia. It wasn't as fun of a time against Texas, but I still like Neek as a potential pick in this class. He's a physical wing or off guard who can defend in multiple spots, knock down shots, and get on the glass. Now, he isn't the best with the ball in his hands, but he's a potential 3-and-D guy who should compete well at the Combine. PJ Hall helped lead Clemson to an Elite 8 run and showed a lot of who he is in the process. I still like his skill set as an inside-out big who can pass it a little bit. There are some concerns in his NBA position and just the level of shooter he actually is, but there's enough there to have him as a mid-second round candidate and a potential Combine riser given he stood out in the same setting last year. It ended in a close game against Marquette, but KJ Simpson was the primary reason Colorado had a couple wins in March, and he hit the game winner against Florida that will be forever remembered in his school's history. As a prospect, despite being undersized, his all-around game and ability to make plays and compete defensively should get him picked. Jalen Wells was one of the more impressive prospects I saw in the second half of the season, and I think he's put himself in a great position to be picked either this year or next. Even with the untraditional path from D2 to the Pac-12, he proved himself as a shooter with good size that can create a little bit off the dribble and stick with players defensively. It's an obvious pitch there for him as a player, and I think this could end up being too low. Adem Bona still has a pretty cut and dry NBA role as an energy big man who, I've said this before, has some of the most ridiculous athletic plays both as a play finisher and in protecting the rim. Now, his inabilities to stay out of foul trouble and lack of success as a playmaker at his size probably limit his overall ceiling, but I'd be fairly happy taking him in the second round if I needed some front court help. Creighton probably could have used a bit more from Trey Alexander in that last game, but I still like his all-around ability as a combo guard who can get shots for himself, has improved as a playmaker, and will shoot the 3-ball better than the splits showed this year. And for all those reasons, I think he could be a good value selection.
Alexander fading away.
Melvin Agenta has been dealing with a sternum injury and didn't get to participate in the Nike Hoop Summit, which is really unfortunate. I wanted to see how he'd look in that setting with all the talent that was there this year, but without that, he's still got solid upside as an off-ball shooter, athlete, and defender already contributing as a pro. And I think what he brings to the table will intrigue a lot of teams throughout the second round and maybe even the late first. Over his last 12 games, Justin Edwards averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist on 56, 47, 84 splits, and flashed some of the two-way upside and shot making that got him high lottery interest coming into the year. He's a second round guy for me right now, but if he convinces as a shooter and works out well, I could see a team taking a chance on his talent in the last couple picks of the first round. Ethan Almanza performed pretty well this year considering the circumstances, and I feel like I still should have him a little higher than this based on the priors, but the questions in him being a full-time 5 and where his most bankable NBA skills reside make it a tougher sell than I'd like. Pelle Larsson was pretty underwhelming in a bad tournament loss to Clemson, and I kind of needed a palate cleanse to get that game out of my head. After doing that, I still like what he brings as a Swiss Army knife wing who can defend and has become a solid shooter, and I think he belongs well into this range. Hunter Salas will have an opportunity to prove this season as real during the pre-draft process. He broke out at Wake Forest, transferring from Gonzaga and showing off a lot as a shooter, shot maker, and competing defensively. And he is a two guard that lacks physically, so that always makes it tougher to break through in the league, but I think he'll provide solid value in that late first to early second round type of range. Ulrich Chomche declared for the draft on Monday. I still think he's a real project that would benefit from another year before entering the NBA, whether that be in college or elsewhere, but his athleticism, defensive and passing upside is always going to be intriguing for a big man, especially as young as he is, born on December 30th of 05. He'll still likely have the opportunity to go elsewhere, but for now he's put his name in the draft hat. Also, Iguodala remains a solid prospect as a scheme versatile defensive big that can really pass it and has a high volume floater game. Now, there were times even in the tournament that you want to see him be a little bit more aggressive around the rim, and he's not the biggest at the 5 spot, but he has a great chance at cracking a rotation and maybe looking even better in the NBA game. Baylor Shireman feels like a guy that I've undervalued a bit when looking at my board and just watching him in March. His combination of size, shooting, and playmaking is pretty rare for this class. He's also a plus rebounder, and despite there being some real athletic or defensive limitations, at least on the ball, I think he fits the mold of what a lot of teams are looking for from a floor spacer in the second round. Jameer Watkins will be one of those guys with a decision to make, given he's not a consensus draftee by most right now, but his defensive versatility, playmaking, and key improvements as a shooter and finisher make him someone I would consider in the top 40. And at the very least, I'd be surprised if he wasn't in high consideration for a two-way in like Miami, Memphis, or Milwaukee. Tyon Grant Foster saved some of his best basketball for the biggest stage of his basketball career to this point, getting Grand Canyon a tournament upset win against St. Mary's and being the best player on the floor against a Final Four team in Alabama. Now, he is already 24, so that may make teams less inclined to spend a pick on him, but the athleticism, shot making, and defensive flashes are intriguing enough for me to consider him here. In a class that's had a few raw wings mocked in the first round all year, Pacome Dadier should probably be a bit closer to that than I had him, and he's another player I think could rise late given he's shown more consistency as a shooter and scorer in his minutes to go along with the athleticism, motor, and slashing upside he has, still at just 18 years old. Cam Christie has also recently declared for the draft while maintaining his college eligibility, and he's someone I would spend the top 40 pick on in this class. He's an NBA level shooter off the catch, on the move, and off the dribble, and though he'll need to develop physically and as a driver, and it probably makes most sense for him to spend another year in school, I think he's a future contributor. Harrison Ingram should get real first round looks as a combo forward who can defend in a few spots, rebounds really well, and makes plays. The shot and off ball game was a necessary development and something I have a lot more confidence in now, and I think he could rise in the combine and pre-draft process in a real way. There have been a lot of rumors, and it seems like Alex Caravan is leaning towards returning to UConn next year, but he's absolutely draftable in my opinion and was a massive part of their back-to-back title runs. He's a high field wing who can shoot it, defend in multiple spots, and just makes winning plays in any way that the team needs it, and I think he's the perfect type of player to connect the dots in the NBA. We talked about this last board, but some of AJ Mitchell's last games this year were some of the best that he's played in terms of shot profile and just showing all of his capabilities as a big playmaking guard. He'll also have a lot to prove over the next couple months as another small conference guy, but he has a skill set to make it happen, and I'd consider him as high as the late first round.
The game, 3.9 assists per game.
I wish we would have seen Weber State's Dylan Jones in a tournament setting at least once in his career, but it's also nice to see a guy stick at a mid-major all 4 years despite the high major interest that's there if they're even halfway decent as an underclassman. Now draft-wise, he'll have to prove that he can make things happen off the ball and some defensively, but at a certain point the production and playmaking at his size are really hard to fade.
Every single team remaining in this tournament except one.
I get a lot of mixed opinions on Bobby Klintman as a prospect, but I personally think he's pretty solid. He's got size, he can shoot it, he moves well without the ball, and has flashes of connected playmaking, playmaking, and he has the tools to be impactful defensively. Now, he's not ready-made by any means, but I think there's a contributor there and one that could be an important piece on the winning team.
When they beat Melbourne United, it's been their athleticism. They're getting up and in as Donovan Clingan.
I was really impressed by Tyler Kolek this season. I'd been a fan of his playmaking ability and competitiveness, but he proved the jumper and craftiness around the rim being real. Now the defense is going to be a huge swing factor for him, but I think that he's got a great chance of running second units in the NBA and being a steady competitive presence off a bench, and that should get you a lot of looks in the first round. I'll be very interested to see where Tijan Salon gets drafted in this class. He's probably the rawest player that's been mocked anywhere near the top 20, but the combination of size, athleticism, and shot making flashes are probably enough to keep him in the vicinity. There's a level of feel on both ends that he lacks that makes me a little bit lower than consensus right now, but he is still 18 in his first professional setting. DaRon Holmes carried his excellent season into the tourney, leading the big comeback against Nevada and putting up 23-11, 3-3 against Arizona in a close loss. An athletic play finishing big who can step out and shoot it, attack a closeout, and provide some rim protection has to get real first round interest. Those who are a little higher on him than me probably buy the physicality in him handling center responsibilities full time just a little bit more, but he definitely showed more than enough to be in this mix. After initially intending on returning to Pitt for his sophomore season, Bub Carrington has declared for the draft. Even though he had a rough patch as he got into conference play, what he showed as a shot maker with solid playmaking chops and good size is enough to keep him in first round conversations, especially with how he played down the stretch and his age.
Leg at the extra pass. Bub Carrington.
I still think Ryan Dunn is worth a first round pick because he is that good defensively. Now for someone that is going to need to drastically improve as a shooter to survive, things like his work ethic and who he is as a person is going to factor in a way that we can't really account for from this distance, but I think he has a chance at changing games on this end in a way that very few others can. And even with those major concerns offensively, that's where his value lies. Now, whether you love him or hate him, Zach Edey had an unbelievable run that led to Purdue finally getting over the hump and to the national title game. I am still a little bit more skeptical in his NBA translation than others, especially those who like him towards the lottery, but I am more of a believer than before. At 7'4", his rim deterrence, screening, and touch in close give him a very good base as an NBA big man. Now, he'll never post up at the rate that he did in college, and he'll need to prove that he can be a positive in that drop against NBA level shot makers, but I think he'll contribute and potentially be a unique weapon for a team. Kevin McCullough exceeded a lot of expectations this season until battling knee injuries and ultimately missing the tournament. He's still one of the best defensive wings in the class, an improved shooter, and an intriguing connected passer. Now he is older and the shot will be key for his success, but it's hard for me not to like the idea of him as a rotational wing as long as the health checks out. Tyler Smith was one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Ignite program in its existence. He came in as a guy who had kind of been floating with OTE after being previously highly touted, but he quickly emerged as a contributor at the G League level and became a potential first round pick. He's one of the best shooters in the class as an effective floor spacing 4 who moves well and has good touch around the rim. He will have a lot of work to do defensively, but he's a solid bet to eventually contribute. Johnny Furphy is at least leaving the option of returning to KU open as he tests the NBA draft waters this year. I like what he brings as an off-ball shooting threat with good size and one of the class's best cutters and rebounders. He will need to improve on the ball defensively and do most things better as a playmaker, especially if he isn't an elite shooter, but I think he's a future contributor, whether that's being a part of this draft or going back to what should be a much better Kansas team as a sophomore and being part of the 2025 class. Miami's Keyshawn George has the type of upside that I could see winning over teams a little higher than we might expect. He's a tall wing who can really shoot it, has high feel, and can be solid defensively. Now the athleticism, frame, and ability to get to the rim could end up being significant enough to hurt his chances, but I was frequently impressed watching his games this season.
Message received that was given by their head coach. George gets free.
I think Cal's Jalen Tyson could end up being a dark horse lottery candidate. He's a dribble, pass, shoot wing who has an impressive pull-up game and carried this team all year long and has stood out defensively for stretches. Now there will be an adjustment in a once again scaled down role and just fully committing to defense out on the perimeter, but I think he has easy top 20 upside and we'll see what he does from this point on. Tristan da Silva carried his hot play into the tournament, and to me it's pretty difficult to dislike his game at this point. He's a big wing or forward who fully convinced as a shooter this year. He's high field on both ends and consistently makes plays. He is an older prospect, but I think he's going to contribute early and often for a team, and for that reason I think anywhere outside of the lottery is good value for him. Yves Misi's combo of vertical spacing, rim protection, and a growing game as a driver give him easy first round value in this class. He didn't have a great tournament, and I think there's some cause for concern in some of his touch around the rim and stretches of lower standard games, but he's got a clear path to NBA value, and while that's always important, it means a little bit more this year. Jacoby Walters still has some appeal as a potential 3-and-D guy who showed more flashes off the dribble and at least improved some defensively along the way, but the drastic struggles he had some on that end and as a finisher and playmaker as a smaller wing make him a much harder surefire lottery pick for me. I'll come to a complete conclusion on this when I get back into his game soon, but for right now he feels more top 20. Most of the bigs in this class don't have star upside, but I do think it's a pretty strong group of fives. Kel'el Ware being part of that group. His set of athletic tools both as a play finisher and rim protector, along with the upside to space the floor and just score away from the rim, are really enticing. Now, even with the motor and physicality being better this year, it wasn't at the place where I'm 100% confident in him, but I still think anywhere in the second half of the first round feels like an appropriate range for him. Jared McCain has been a little low on my board in the past, but he's rightfully moved up. He has all the makings of a complimentary guard who is a great shooter, is high field, and a sound team defender. I do still question him a little bit as a creator, but he does enough and is efficient almost everywhere, including in his off the dribble number. He's a well-rounded player who should have a lot of teams interested. Providence's Devin Carter has a whole lot to like as a utility guard who can really defend and make plays on that end of the floor, but he also showed he can make things happen offensively in a bigger way this year, most importantly as a shooter. If he was a little bit better decision maker and passer and someone I felt would run offense for stretches, I'd probably have him as high as like the top 8, but for what he does bring, he belongs as a potential late lottery pick into the top 20. Kyle Filipowski was going to need to be way more impactful for Duke in the tournament for them to avoid losing to NC State, and he just wasn't, especially in containing DJ Burns. Now, I'm not holding that against him completely. I think he's still a fine prospect as a stretch big who can handle and pass and improved on defense this year. And in the right spot, likely playing just a little bit more forward than he did this year, I think he can make a real impact. Isaiah Collier remains one of the more interesting prospects because even as much of a struggle of a season as it was and the inconsistencies that he had, there are maybe 2 prospects who can put pressure on a defense as a driver and playmaker like he can. Now, again, the shot, the in-between game, the pace make it a little bit tougher to be all in on him, but there's not too many others with his type of upside. Cody Williams continues to be one of the tougher evaluations in the class, and the injuries down the stretch didn't exactly help that. He's a lanky wing who has real upside as a slasher and generally as a connective wing on both ends, but he's pretty physically behind. He still can't get into a pull-up comfortably. He shot a good percentage but low volume from 3. It's just not as clear-cut as I'd like it, or some people can describe at times. At some point his talent I think is worth betting on still, and it'll probably end up a lottery pick for me, but I've grown a bit more hesitant over the course of the year. Dalton Knecht's rise to being a Naismith finalist and an All-American was one of my favorite parts of this college season, and heading to the next level he has clear appeal as an off-ball threat who can really shoot it, can create some for himself, and has good size. Now he's going to really need to get up to speed defensively, and the track record for 23-year-old lottery picks is not great, but I think he has every piece to contribute at a high level, and I'd honestly be pretty surprised if he didn't in some fashion. Stephon Castle was another huge part of this national title run, and he remains a compelling prospect. He's a pretty special defender that should be able to match up 1 through 3 pretty well in the NBA, which is no easy task. From there, I like his energy and ability to just make things happen. Now the hope is that we can get him up to speed as a spot shooter first and then slowly bring more of the creation that he showed in high school. That's probably going to end up being a little too much offensive projection for me to be as high on him as I'd like to be, but he has the DNA of a connective NBA wing that helps you win games. Reed Sheppard had a very disappointing tournament game against Oakland, but I wouldn't react strongly to that one game being representative of who he is as a player. There are questions in how high you take a small guard who isn't the most natural creator, but he's high field, high production, and an elite shooter, and I'm pretty confident he's going to contribute in some significant way for a long time. Now, there is a chance that he returns to Kentucky for his sophomore year. Usually a projected top 10 pick would never consider that, but given he's kind of a Kentucky lifer, I wouldn't be surprised if he did, so we'll see what happens there. Coming into the year, I was fairly skeptical of Zaccharie Risacher, and unfortunately, he's looked a lot like the guy I was afraid he could be offensively. He can be passive by nature, and when the shot isn't going, nearly invisible on that end of the floor. Now, I still like him as a 3-and-D wing, and he's really good off-ball defensively. He moves well, so I'm not abandoning the great stretch that he had, but I find it much harder to consider him at the top of the draft.
Watch him catch that rock off the dribble.
Donovan Clingan was probably the most important piece in UConn's second straight title, and that's coming off of last year where he was about as good of a backup center as I've seen, so the college career really isn't going to get too much better than what he had. What he brings to an NBA team is fairly obvious as a high-level rim protector, drop big, and budding play finisher and passer. Now, I've been weighing just how high you draft that, given he doesn't have a ton of upside offensively, but you know what you're getting should be high impact as long as he stays healthy. Nikola Topic is reportedly nearing a return to the court on April 22nd in the ABA quarterfinals against SC Derby. Of course, missing the last 3.5 months with a knee injury, but even then, I'm not 100% sure how much we'll be able to take away from that given the circumstances, but it'll be good to see him back out there. A big guard with his level of driving and playmaking production still at just 18 years old is hard not to have as a top 5 candidate in this class, even with some of the concerns defensively in his in-between game and just general ability to play off the ball. Modest Buzelis made some headlines in saying that he wanted a one-on-one matchup against Zach Edey. I don't think that would tell us much about either of them considering the roles that they're going to play in the league, but I do like the competitiveness, and if I was in his shoes, I would be just as confused to see him pass me in the eyes of the consensus. But Modest has appeal as a connective combo forward with the upside to dribble, pass, and defend, and if you have him this high, you probably also have confidence in his jumper becoming respectable given its importance to his offensive fit.
Gilder, the lob for
Even with some of the clear issues on defense and how you fit a player like him on certain teams, I think Rob Dillingham has the most complete offensive game from a guard in this class. He's the most dynamic creator, he can play off the ball, and wasn't even fully unlocked in his role this season. Now, we detailed all of his pluses and minuses in his game in this full scouting report, so be sure to go check that out if you haven't already. Despite Ron Holland's stock seemingly going in the opposite direction for a lot of people, I still think he's one of the best prospects in the class. When you look at the other lottery wings and compare them, none of them are as athletic, have the overall creation upside that he has, or play with his level of tenacity. Now, the 3-ball is going to be huge and will take him time, and he's got to be sharper in his defensive positioning, but I think he has the best tools of that group and has probably made the most progress, and will likely be a top 5 lock for me.
handoff. Jenkins. Holland, what a good head fake. It was so soft.
And then as we've had it, Alex Sarr comes in at number 1. I don't really have too much new to say other than to check out his scouting report too for some more insight. While he is the lowest level number 1 prospect I've had since doing this, I think he has the best combination of upside and impact in this class, and unless something major happens, he'll likely stay there the rest of the way.
Norton по домашней на 2 и Каттон 2.
I appreciate y'all for watching this one, and definitely shout out to everybody who joined the bracket challenge group this year. My guy Caleb ended up winning the whole thing, putting together one of the best brackets I've honestly ever seen, and taking home that gift card. So shout out to him, and shout out to everybody who just, decided to participate. But yeah, that's all I really got for this one. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you are new around here, and leave a comment down below of whose scouting report you want to see next. As always, I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect. Until next time, I'm out.